Ready. Meeting on Monday, January 24th, 2022. Instructional Committee, Subcommittee has been called to order at 4:31. Roll call.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here.
Ms. Larrabee?
Here.
Ms. Pereira? Here.
Salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In pursuant to open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Deb, do we have citizens' input?
No, you don't.
Thank you. Next on is discussion of curriculum updates. Wonders Illustrative, Carnegie, and Open Syed. You want to refer to?
So, yeah, we'll get started. We actually, I'm going to send it over to Dr. Curley, but as you know, the district has adopted several different curricular materials for different grade levels, and those contracts came before the school committee in June. But one of the things that we did find was that they were not vetted through the subcommittee. Although at the June meeting, all the directors were there to answer any questions, but those contracts were approved without questions and without a presentation. As we try to put ourselves in a good place and put some good systems in place, certainly we know that anytime there's purchases of that kind or any changes, that we're supposed to go through the process of the subcommittees. So what we've been doing is setting up subcommittee meetings, getting ourselves into a cycle. So we'll bring in before you an update on what we're doing for literacy as well as math and science. Those are the contracts that were approved in June of 2020. So, Dr. Curley?
So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of an overview. Sure.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Can we do introductions, because we do have a new member on the school committee, so she's aware of who's in the room. If you want to start.
Sure. I'm
Please.
Dr. Kimberly LaLiberty. I'm the science director for the district for pre-K to 12.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Patterson. I'm the principal at Morton Middle School.
I'm Matt Sakel. I'm the Dean of Mathematics at Durfee.
I know you.
I'm Tracy Curley. I am the interim assistant superintendent, chief academic officer.
I'm Stephanie Kennedy. I'm the director of elementary ELA and mathematics.
And I'm Shelley. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, thank you.
So I'm going to start off a little bit with an overview of kind of what brought us to all of these new curriculum purchases. Fall River and actually Massachusetts is doing a lot of work with TNTP. They're like most recently, newly famous for their a report they did called the Opportunity Myth, and the TNTP, the New Teacher Project, started out as I think of it almost like Teach for America. They did teaching fellowships, bringing qualified people into urban areas. They moved their work toward advocacy to get more teachers certified because there were so many barriers, and they've slowly become a partner in districts, in states, and schools, really around improving teaching and learning for all students. So they put out their study, The Opportunity Myth, in 2019, and really just reported out on what student experiences were like and how those experiences were leading to student success or not after graduation. So we overall, they found that students really want to do well in school. They're doing what they're asked to do while they're there. They're in classrooms. They're taking direction from their teachers. They're learning what they're asked to learn, but they're still not meeting with success. And they're finding overwhelmingly that that's true for students in low-income areas, students of color, English learners, students with special needs. And a lot of it has to do with access to grade level standards. So a big finding of theirs in this report was really that students are missing out on 4 key resources. And primarily, they're looking at the first thing that they're missing out on grade appropriate assignments. And so we're making a commitment to putting grade appropriate assignments in front of students, all of our students. And we started that process with an investment in the high quality instructional materials. So Mrs. Ponce referenced the fact that we've already started to implement them. So back in June of 2020, we came before school committee, we've made the purchases, and now we are going through the process of providing professional development to teachers and getting those in the hands of students. So, we've set district goals very specifically around these making grade appropriate assignments available to all students. So the focus of our observations as we're going into schools is really looking at the implementation of the new curriculum where it's available, because it's not every content area, but we do have it in multiple content areas and across grade levels. So we're looking at the implementation of that and the degree to which students are engaging in the rigorous tasks associated with these materials. So these 4 resources in particular have been a major focus for us. The Wonders, Illustrative, Carnegie, Open SciEd. And we're finding kind of what we knew to be true, and it's really reinforcing the fact that getting the resources in front of teachers serves dual purposes. Certainly it ensures, we're hoping to ensure that the kids are getting access to the materials. But another piece of it is just that the teachers aren't spending an inordinate amount of time, surfing the web, taking, time out of their planning, just trying to vet curriculum materials and trying to be critical consumers. We're kind of helping them in that way and then providing professional development around those. So we are going to take a look across these 4 resources. As the directors and I are going to talk a little bit about how each one of them was chosen and kind of where we are in the implementation. And then we've invited middle school principal Mrs. Patterson and then Matt Sakel up at the high school to just talk a little bit about the experience as well.
Okay. So the process that we took in the elementary level was similar in both ELA and math. And so to not sound redundant, I'll just reference that back to this when I get into the math world. So when we originally started this process, we met with DESE curriculum leads, and we started talking about a review and field testing process that they were recommending for us as a district that they had found effective in other districts. So rather than having a pilot of several programs, they suggested field testing, which would allow for us to be in more classrooms across the district, getting a sampling of teachers in all buildings. As a academic lead group, we started to look through the resources that we had to vet these materials before getting them in our hands and spending the time meeting with publishers. And so we sifted through Massachusetts Cure Rate and Ed Reports and other research reports to limit our field of programs that we were going to be looking deeply at. From there, we started to put together a list of district priorities, what was important to us as leaders with regard to the purchase that we were making, and then we sent out a survey to our educators to find out what was important to them. Then we crosswalked those things and we folded them in with the Mass Cure Rate rubric, because that's what DESE has found to be top priorities. So from there, we created our curriculum vetting rubric. And then we started to meet with publishers from the short list that we had narrowed it down to at that point. And so after we did that, we started to look through materials of the publishers that kind of spoke to our district priority list. And from there, we started to market out to our teachers an application as to who would like to do the field testing of the different programs. And we had a lot of teachers that wanted that, but then unfortunately we closed due to COVID, and so we had to switch gears at that point. And so at that point, I started to put together a a list of different logins for the two programs that we kind of had left at that point, and offered that login information out to teachers with some guidance around how they might attack those. And we had little short videos that would help them navigate the site so that they felt a level of comfort as they went in to start looking at things. And then they were surveyed as to which program they felt was the best fit for their situation and their students, and 77.1% of teachers at that point voted that Wonders was the best fit for our students at that time. And so that's when we move forward with the purchase for Wonders. So on the next slide, it's the reasons why we chose Wonders, which are directly aligned to our district priorities that we had surfaced as we did the academic leads and the administrators, and then finally the teachers. So things like that the program was impactful, according to what the research said, that was number one. Complexity of text was worthy of student attention. There were multiple genres and multiple opportunities for writing for students that were authentic and explicit. That there was a diverse literature base that allowed for different identities, different cultural perspectives. That there was supports put in place for teachers in the program to help students access that core curriculum. So whether those students were at or below or above grade level, whether those students had language needs or disabilities, that there was an intervention component, and that routines were in place to support all 4 domains of language, plus more. And so from there, we made the purchase and PD started. And so the PD has been continuous since the launch of the program. So in June of our first year, which was 2020, that was the end of the school year that we had decided that this was the right program, PD started. At that point, our K-2 educators were the only educators receiving that PD because we did a slow roll. So we started with K-2 in SY21 and then adopted in 3-5 this current year. And so we were thoughtful about the PD that we were putting in front of those teachers at that moment in June of 2020. We were thoughtful to include both the launch of the program, so the instructional path, and the digital teaching tools, because we weren't sure as to what was going to be happening that following year because COVID had already started. Since then, we've had a ton of PD offered, whether it be virtual and live for a particular audience, or recorded and offered out to our teachers. And those have been sent out in Teach Point, have also been marketed out through principals and leads. Things from close reading and analytical writing, foundational skills, engagement in a virtual setting, down to finite things like working with L students, whether you're the mainstream teacher working with L students or you are the pull-out educator, MLL educator working with those L students. And so there's been a lot of professional development offered through the company, and we have the ability to ask them to tailor that to a specific thing. So their initial launch didn't include anything about MLL students, but we're aware of what that data is looking like. And so we asked them to, whether it was designed or not designed, because they could have something boxed, to present out on that particular topic. And so just 2 weeks ago, they presented out to Fonseca's teachers of students that are L, and then that was recorded and sent out to all other principals and leads so that they could then use that recording to help move their own staffs. And then in addition to that, right now they're designing something to support students with disabilities. Our evidence of impact is a change in our data. We see changes in teacher practice as we're in buildings all the time. I walk consistently with my leads. Dr. Crowley joins me, and we're looking for, are we implementing our high quality core materials and putting those high-quality tasks in front of kids. Any questions about Wonders before I move
Any
on?
questions, Wonders?
Is that different than what we have?
It's, yeah, mine just has more detail.
Okay, I'm looking over
If
there.
you
I'm trying to
want
match
it,
up to the, I'm trying to match up to what you're reading. I'm saying, I don't
I
think I
can
got the right
certainly
page.
send it along, though, if you want that level of detail.
No, I just had a question on the purchase and the purchase price. Like, I've heard now at the last meeting as well, that we approved this already without discussion.
Yep.
Which obviously, you know, that, you know, bothers me in one way, but what exactly did we purchase? So when was it in a group of, like, here's all a bunch of expenses, or is it just the contract, or, like, I'm just trying to figure out what we actually
Yeah.
did.
So in SY20, when we started to put together the pricing, we only got a quote for K-2. It included 45 classroom kits for our classroom teachers. That includes everything from the teacher's manuals to the individual student books to manipulatives and other materials that kids might need or teachers might need. That was K-2. And so, and then in addition to that, the following year is when we got the quote for grades 3 to 5, and that too came with the same. It also includes, Mr. Aguirre, all of the professional development and the consumables for 6 years for both grade levels. So the current thing that is on the table for your review is to support special educators, and L teachers by buying them teachers' manuals. In the past, Fall River has never purchased teachers' manuals for inclusion push-in educators, such as special educators and MLL teachers. And what we're finding is that those teachers are finding such value in these materials that they are using them so that they can align their instruction to what's happening in the classroom. Just becomes difficult for them to navigate the website. And on the slide that looks like this, these are just some comments from different special educators and MLL teachers as to why they think having the teachers' manuals will support their work with their students. And so you'll find things like it's difficult, obviously, to navigate multiple grade levels on a digital site. Two, it's easier for them to co-plan. It's nice to have the manual there so they can look at those differentiation activities and the teacher supports as they're teaching their students. And so that's what you'd see on that page.
Yeah, when I asked about this, it wasn't because I'm not in favor of it,
Right.
but it seems like we were missing some info, as well as I'm even confused a little bit of how we didn't do this originally, because it's almost like as if it looks like we said we were going to do all of these things, and then, oh, by the way, we need to get these resources for ELL or special educator. Why didn't that happen? You can't go back
Well,
in time.
I mean-
But the issue is, like, how does that happen?
I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be able to speak to people's thinking prior to coming on board, but in the past, the history has been that if you are an inclusion teacher, you share materials, right? So if somebody's pushing in, or what we relied on was that the classroom teacher was going to have her set of materials, and the person pushing in was going to be able to use the materials online or share with that teacher. After we started rolling it out, people said, no, it's beneficial for us to have our own materials. So that's what this supplemental purchase is, that as well as classroom libraries. I agree, it was a huge purchase. I know that before the school committee, when the contract came up, there was all the materials and all the backup information in regards to moving to a new curriculum. We used to have Reading Street, and then we moved over to Wonders. Typically, that is what happens, and what should happen should be vetted through the subcommittee and then referred to the full committee. That didn't happen. We're just trying to establish the system for doing it and moving forward. For us, I know that when I came on board, you're going to hear about illustrative math. That was already in my time. We went before the subcommittee and brought illustrative math forth. But this started 3 years ago. the Wonders piece as they prepare to roll it out. So that didn't.
Yeah, and it's I just think systems-wise,
Yeah, I agree.
we have a director of special ed. We have the director of MLL, whatever the new name is, whatever. But we have administrators throughout. Like, it shouldn't get to this point where we purchase 3/4 of a program and forget about. Not saying that they did that intentionally, but as a committee, we're like, okay, we're going to support this. Then all of a sudden, now we see 400,000.
Yep.
When we see that, we should get a clear one-pager on here's what it is. Now we can vet it through here, and it's probably going to come with that, explanation of why. It makes no sense to me. I read through the documents. We're copying things in black and white, and where there's colors intentional.
Yep.
What? Like, I'm reading this saying to myself, this doesn't make any sense. So I think it's good that you brought it back, and I'm in favor of it. My concern with the curriculums is general, and we've spoken about this, is that we spend an awful lot of money across the whole district, and as part-time school committee members, we don't get into the nitty-gritty on all of this, but we're spending money on things that I don't even know about. I hear new ones here and there, and then I don't know what is the usage, what is the direction, what is the fidelity with the usage, and I don't think that we necessarily do that as a district very well. So
We're starting to. So, first of all, this is hard copies of materials, et cetera, that we need consistency across the district, right? So if I'm a student at Fonseca, 4th grade, if I transfer to Laterno, we're using the same literacy curriculum. So we haven't had that in many years. It's been, there's been a lot left to schools to make their own decision. We know that we have an achievement gap that needs to be closed. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by providing high quality materials, consistency. We have common assessments that we've spent a lot of money on, that we invest. So we want to make sure that we measure, but we have an even, playing field for everybody, right? So in the usage piece that you're talking about for the technology, I'm assuming the digital programs that we have, we've inventoried them. We actually are meeting to look at all the usage. I think that we just historically have kept adding programs and not really saying, okay, we're not using this any longer. Let's eliminate this before we purchase something else. Let's look at what is it that we're using, what are we finding that is effective, and what can we let go of. So that's a process that we're going through.
Yeah, I look at the, Pearson, the one that we switched from? In here, it looks like we had used Pearson. So I would be curious to see, did we use it, or did we just say it didn't work? Not that I want to go back to it, but when we look at from 2011, it talks about in here that, the level of fidelity has waned, significantly. So that's why I'm asking these questions. So
We did, and that's
what
okay.
is the system to just say we are either doing it or we're not doing it? And I'm not trying to, everybody needs a little bit of autonomy. But I think what we've been doing here is a lot of autonomy and not sticking to the
We spoke about that
skeleton.
today. Yeah.
Yep, and those are good questions. That's actually, before you bring on a new curriculum, you do have to, reflect and see what's worked and what didn't work in the previous one, right? So, I remember when we brought on Reading Street, and when we brought on Reading Street, I was the principal at Doran. That's one of the things that was part of our turnaround work, right? You have to make sure that we have consistency across all grade levels. I think that with any new thing, we had fidelity in some schools, and then we had a lot of leeway in other schools. Stephanie just said, one of the things that we do is she's in classrooms with those leads, making sure, and we're looking at that, and that's how we're going to be able to monitor and support the implementation. We're expecting that everybody's using Wonders. We're expecting that everybody's using illustrative math. I agree, the what is what we need to see consistently across the board. Then the how it's implemented, that's going to vary because the way I teach is different than the way she teaches. But we do need to have consistency with the what's happening from school to school, so that kids know exactly what to expect and that everybody's using the same curriculum, so that as we gather data, it's a truer picture of what we're doing.
Yep, no, I appreciate it. The only thing I would ask is when it comes back that we get it more detailed. It wasn't very clear from the original that we had last meeting that this was mostly for consumables and the piece that in here about the color-coded copies like that.
Yeah.
It might have been in there, but once we knew we were kicking it over.
wasn't.
But I think that would tell us all, like, what are we actually buying here? We're not buying, it's like buying textbooks, it's like buying something concrete versus when we say we're just gonna add another $500,000 in curriculum. That decision was made in a different way.
Okay.
So if it's $500,000 worth of consumables, lay out the rationale so the committee can look at it, the public could see it. Yep, this is what we're doing, rather than just let it, go to.
We'll be specific with it.
But
Yeah,
there
I
you go.
just want to clarify, so there's actually two parts to the quote that went forward, which is the teacher manuals for everyone. And I just want to be clear that these are teacher manuals, they are not the materials that go along with those manuals. So the MLL teacher and the special educator will still have to use materials from the mainstream classrooms stock. Meaning, if I'm an MLL teacher and I need to use student text, books for all learners, leveled readers, I have to get them from my mainstream classroom counterpart. The one thing that is consumable is the second page, which speaks to the L readers. So there are two pieces. This is specific to Henry Lloyd Community Schools program. They moved this year, as you know, from our model that we've had for servicing our foundational students to an inclusion model. And so these quotes come specifically from that school. They have about a third of their population that are considered foundational students and MLL students that are now being in an inclusion setting. And so the materials that come along with the regular classroom set does not include these scaffolded readers for specific to this subgroup of students. And so again, like just teacher manuals still have to borrow except in this case, which is that scaffolded reader for the MLL student and teachers.
Yeah, I mean, this, I haven't heard this from the MLL department. We're hearing this through, and then when we have a lot of divisions of people, like where's the leadership in that department to be saying this is what we need for our people? Like, so that's lacking, I think, unless you guys are all representing.
So
it.
I have worked closely with the MLL department in this specific purchase. The two groups are coming together. Like I work alongside Tyler and Fernanda to support the teachers of this program. And so I'm speaking to this because I was part of the decision making along with that team.
Yeah, I was just referring to that you're not the director.
Yeah, correct.
That's all I was meaning by that. But the piece that you just said about it's in here about the colored text. And
Yes.
So if it's for you said that's for the L's, but is there materials that the special education students need that would help them the same way that it's for the L readers? Are we not purchasing quality materials that are needed? Like this quote here says, these texts are not ancillary, but rather mandatory to provide differentiated learning experiences within the core curriculum and to the language needs of our MLL students. Like I see this as a basic, like this is the required piece.
Yes.
Is there the equivalent of that for special
So
ed, or is it not as?
No, there isn't another text that would be specific to students with disabilities, but I would say that a student with disabilities could be reading at, or below, or above grade level. It depends on their disability. And so if I went into one of those inclusion teachers' rooms, the special educator, I wouldn't find the materials that I need to service those kids. What I would see is that that teacher is borrowing those materials from the mainstream classroom to use in that small group. So she doesn't have her own set, but she has a partner.
We have enough sets that we're not leaving anything on the table.
Right.
So after we make this purchase, next year we're not coming back with, let's
500,000 more.
we're good for 6 years. So.
We've been very clear about
And after
that.
6 years, what happens?
Well, I mean, we will have, it doesn't mean that we only will be using Wonders for 6 years. Sometimes it's a lot longer, but it was just the way we were doing that was, the breakdown was they broke down that payment for 6 years. Kevin chose to pay it forward so that with funds so that we could be ahead, but That doesn't mean we're gonna,
And it
after
said
6 years, we're
digital,
gonna.
6 years digital,
yeah,
so like
yes.
we can extend
Yes.
it, but it won't be as costly probably.
Or if we need additional materials, consumables, that would be the only thing we would have to reorder.
Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Agia. I have a question. Is anybody using Pearson still at all? There are no educators
No.
using Pearson? Okay.
We're using Wonders in every classroom in the city, with the exception of foundational classrooms, except at Laterno, who is piloting, and Henry Lord as well, because they're an inclusion setting. In some substantially separate classrooms, although they have the materials, they have to modify them as they see fit for their students.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Would it be fair to say that if we had a student at Watson, and we all know about the transient, and this Watson student got transferred to Fonska, in Wonders, would they be, when they got to Fonska, would they be on the same curriculum as they were on at?
Absolutely.
That's a big question. That's been asked.
They'll
Many
be,
times.
Yep, they'll be on
And-
the same curriculum and likely hovering around the same story, because we do have pacing guides and curriculum maps created. For K to 3 specifically, we have maps created, and for 4 and 5, we have pacing created, and we're starting that mapping now.
How's the feedback on the PD, the educators?
So it's really good through Wonders. I've heard, we see it through the feedback and Teach Point, and then any contact that I've had with teachers, if that topic happens to come up, they've been highly satisfied.
Yeah, you
Yes.
as well? I yield. Anything else on
One more
Wonders?
question,
Yep,
please.
Mr. Aguirre?
So when I look at the presentation on illustrative math, which
Yeah.
is upcoming,
Yep,
one of the things that was very clear at the subcommittee meeting was that our scores are flat
yes.
for multiple years in a row. Even though we kept hearing, oh, our scores are going through the roof, but they were flat. What is the equivalent of that? Is there an equivalent of that type of thing in the ELA?
Yes, so
Like, I know you looked at some of these in here, but, and this might be something that just throw out to us at for the formal meeting, but to see where, there's obviously a rationale for why we changed. And I think when you presented at the subcommittee, where it was very clear why we were changing the math curriculum, it was sort of like 2 + 2 = 4.
yes,
And
it's the same, honestly, in ELA. We saw it, I think I noted in that document, I spoke specifically to the early literacy skills and how those have remained flat over the past several years. But I'm not sure that there's any comprehension data in there, because we didn't have many years of the same assessment to speak to that.
Just as a point of reference, when we have new members too, so we use dibbles, we use these terminologies, if we can just explain those two. Like,
Sure.
I think you're gonna say that the scores were flat and our reading levels are flat, our math level, basically we're flat across the board. And we're trying to do these different things, so anything that it just makes it seem very clear, this is why we're changing from one to another. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Aguirre. So now we move on to what is?
Illustrative math.
Still me.
Still you.
Just me. And so the process was the same for illustrative math. And again, teachers filled out that survey, but we did have an unofficial pilot of some of the units happening in classrooms. We had them, and at the time we were using Engage New York. And there was a high level of dissatisfaction with Engage New York. I was highly procedural. And so teachers started to mess around with using illustrative, so we had that feedback from teachers, as well as a survey that was sent out asking teachers a couple of questions around whether they thought it was the right time to make this move. And 176 respondents, people responded, and 89% of them felt that an adoption was in the best interest of students. The reason that illustrative was selected is because it's highly aligned to how we teach math in Fall River, this constructivist approach. There's a clear learning path for teachers and students. It's problem-based. It teaches students to think critically, and it uses high-leverage routines, again, all 4 domains of language. And some of those routines are routines that were already established in Fall River, as that is our philosophy for teaching like a constructivist approach, and these routines lead to that. It's engaging, student-centered, and culturally responsive. We got lucky because DESE offered out the accelerated math grant, and we applied for it, and we were awarded the money for that. And so with that, all of our student consumables were paid for this year. Our teacher materials were paid for this year, meaning the teacher manuals. And we have 1 full year of LearnZillion, which is the digital platform aligned to the illustrative math program. It offers teachers a virtual PowerPoint of the content for the day that can be modified. It also has a student platform that allows students to complete the tasks online. And so this year, the grant is now open for this year, and we intend to apply for that so that we can hopefully get another year. With that is, we also got the professional development package. And so we've had all of our educators trained at this point in how to use the program and how to navigate the website, the LearnZillion page, so that they can use it appropriately. In addition to that, our administrators are currently enrolled, and our math leads are currently enrolled in how to support teachers through observation and feedback. And in February, we have another PD with them during the February PD day, and it's focused on planning effectively using student work.
Any questions? Mr. Aguirre?
So if I'm looking at the other page of this thing here. Sure. When you look, and we've already been through this, but the public schools not meeting benchmark, grades 2, 3, 4, and 5, this was the really telling thing. And I'm reading here, in the third year of the district-wide implementation, districts saw a low percentage of students meeting grade level expectations. So this was like a year ago, thereabouts. Is it possible to send the committee details on this data by school?
Sure.
So just curious to see how each school was contributing to those numbers. The numbers obviously are not good, so we needed to change that. And I think at the subcommittee we had said we were moving forward with this regardless, but we got the grant, so we didn't need that. Is there anything else with the math that needs to be added, purchased? Are we holding back on any kind of support for the math program?
Not at this point.
We can't afford to hold back.
Well, right, but we are applying for a grant to extend the financial support for the consumables for students and things like that. But that original purchase was for teacher materials that, will last for multiple years, but then student materials and the LearnZillion platform, it was only for 1 year. So in the event that we were not awarded the grant moving forward, we would need to make that purchase.
And LearnZillion is, I know it's a resource, but do we have anything what were we using before that came on? Is there any other math computer programming that we have?
Yes.
Yes.
So LearnZillion is LearnZillion, the reason there's even a connection to LearnZillion is because Illustrative was created through a nonprofit organization, and so they don't market and sell their materials. And so they rely on a third party to create those consumables and digitize their work. And so that's why LearnZillion is involved, and they're the ones that actually just make the money off of that. So LearnZillion is aligned to Tier 1 content. It does not go off core. It stays aligned to the actual content. And so to meet the needs of kids where they are and move them up, we do have other programs in the city. So for example, Dreambox is used in several schools, and ST Math is used in the other schools. And those are, ST Math stays aligned to grade level core for the most part. You can assign off grade level, and Dreambox stays off grade level, but you can assign grade level. So it's a different type of.
Yep. I would just ask that we get some data on the usage by school of all
Yeah.
of those programs?
I can do that. I do that constantly. It's messaged out to principals.
I will say that we are actually, today we had a workshop for ST Math. We only had limited, just a couple of schools, that we have 4 schools that started using that. We used to use Dreambox across the board, everybody. That's, again, fading away. ST Math, we looked at the data, it's very strong, and we are moving towards ST Math for schools. So today we had more people from other schools come in for a workshop, and we are looking at the usage, and we're looking at, okay, so has this already filled its purpose? Is it time to move forward or not? We have to have those conversations with the leads as well as look at the data and usage on both.
Yeah, now I know, because I've been here, to know that the assignments for the district leads was different, like Mrs. Kennedy has a different,
Yep.
like there's not one just English, like she just did English and math, but I think the committee maybe should know that as well, like if you went here to know, there's a thing to say, if I'm on the school committee and then we say, you know, she's the math lady, you know, or she's in charge of the math, so we know the math top to bottom, but is it a little different system? I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but I think you letting the committee know to say that what's the rationale, or is there going to be some different things happening, just so we can get a feel for it. Most times people complain that we hire too many administrators, to be quite honest. And we look at these meetings and we say, here's the reason why we have to pay for, but the results haven't been there, but people need to be here, and then they hold people accountable to do things the right way. So, you know, I'm not putting a plug in for more administrators, but I'm putting in a plug to say it's legit, to say why there is a reason why we have a lot of administrators. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. But if we don't see that, we hear from everybody, they're hiring too many administrators, and, you know, it gets frustrating, and we have to like kind of take your word for it, or push back if we don't know. So I'd rather just say, here's what we have as our organizational structure, and here's where we're going, and here's how we're going to get there. And then when we see the results, you either get the results or you don't get the results. So I think we've talked about this too. I think you're on the right track, and whatever you think needs to change, you need to let us know. So if there's personnel, if there's job descriptions and things, just because we did it a certain way doesn't mean it has to stay that way. So
I agree, and you will be, there will be a shift that I will be speaking with all of you about that. So as we try to really make sure that we're shoring up our people and maximizing all of our people, we will be looking at that.
sounds good. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just one question. It's, now, basically, we're going to get there at some point to where we are with Wonders Now, where everybody in the curriculum is going to have the same curriculum.
We're there.
So,
Everyone
there.
has it now.
yeah, so we're there now.
Yes.
We're there now. So I thought we were almost there, and there's still work to do, but we are,
Yeah, it wasn't a slow roll.
Right,
It
we
opened
rolled at K to 5.
okay, we'll
At
get K to
once.
5. All right, thank you. I yield. Anything? On to Carnegie.
So really on a similar timeline to the original K-2 Wonders rollout, within that same year, we had prioritized early literacy at the elementary level, and then prioritized math at the secondary level. It had been, I don't know, forever. There really had been like a viable district-wide curriculum. More recently, we had been using Engage New York at the secondary level, but there really hadn't been like a singular core resource. So, as I said, on the same timeline, we started taking a look at curriculum resources for secondary math, using the same kind of reference resources, the Mass Curate, using Ed Reports, using Equip resources, and engaged teachers in presentations, Q&A sessions, things like that. We were actually able to open it up to more teachers during COVID closure. We had about 70 teachers who participated in these information sessions and in trying out some of the problems and things like that, and ended up landing with Carnegie. And so, of course, like anything else, because it would obviously need to be, we looked at something that was aligned to Common Core standards, really looked at the research around cognitive science. 74% of teachers ended up saying that Carnegie was the choice. It really was coming down to illustrative at the secondary level, along with Carnegie, and it was really the platform, the Mathia platform, that is part of the instructional routine for Carnegie that seemed to kind of edge out the competition. I'll actually defer to you a little bit just in talking about kind of what Mathia brings into the instruction and what that experience is like. But yeah, artificial intelligence software, and it's pretty. It's one of these things that it's not an extra. It's not, oh, this is the intervention. It's actually part of the instruction that's built into the expectation for the use of the curriculum. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how it's looking at Durfee?
Yeah, so I can tell you, so at Durfee, I have a lot of things I wanted to say to a lot of things I heard. I think it was right about when we bought this for 6 years. I think it was the right thing, because so it's my second year back at Durfee. Last year was what it was, right? We tried hybrid, Edgenuity came into play. So we all talk at Durfee and say this is really our official kickoff of Carnegie. I can tell you one of the things I've heard over and over is, oh Matt, come on. This is going to be like all the other ones, we're going to do it for a year, it's going to go away. Like, no, this isn't going away. We have a 6-year deal. Like, that's made a difference to be able to say that. Because in past years, it's kind of been, is Pearson 1 year, I've got the other one, and then teachers just kind of created all their own stuff, right? So the fact that we have it for 6 years is a selling point to get more buy-in from teachers. This isn't going away. There's a lot of questions that you guys had before. Ms. Ponce made a good point. And the teachers laugh at me at Durfee some of them. I say, listen, we must do this with fidelity, right? So that's the word they hear me use, and I come up, I'm telling you, no. We have this opportunity right here, but if we don't do it with fidelity, how can we really rate this thing? Because it is different. A lot of things are happening. We finally have a curriculum that we put down in front of people, and they're looking at it, and some of the teachers are looking at it going, that's my standard? Because we haven't taught to that high of a level in a long time. And I'm not knocking anybody before me. I love Durfee. I was there myself before. But things slip little by little sometimes. And so this was a big wake-up call to say, like I actually did a PD one time. I did a PD a couple of weeks ago, and we had a vertical alignment. And we're like, okay, whose standard is this, right? So we're doing an AP class question. We got to the Algebra 2 team, and they didn't know it was their standard. Because that's how long it's been since they got through a curriculum that said, these are your content standards, right? So it makes a difference. What Ms. Ponce said, I think, is true also, that you can walk through any classroom at Durfee and you're going to see Carnegie in action. I insist upon it. But you're going to see levels right now of variation. Some people have jumped on board, and it is fantastic. Some people, they're kind of reeling in now, and some people I still need to push a little bit. But the expectation is, in your room, we are doing Carnegie Math. The part that we're trying to get used to is that this online platform, Mathia, it's a day of curriculum. But what it does is the book part, or we used to call it that they would be on their own, but we really didn't mean that. So the classes that you're used to seeing, Carnegie is designed in a workshop model exactly as we want our classes to run. They lay it out that way, right? They lay it so that you are starting with the do now, you're getting a little mini lesson when you're getting started, and then it is exactly what we want kids to do. It's me and I release you. And you go and as a student, you do the thinking, you do the heavy load, and we come back, quick intervention, little check, right? Are we all right? And I release you again. So it's designed exactly as we want. I'm not saying that it's working perfect yet, because right now kids are not really back in that mode of that happening, right? So it's been, I got this brand new curriculum, and it's been a little bit of a push sometimes to say, Matt, but when I put them out there, right, it's really not doing what we wanted to do yet. And I said, well, but we don't, the curriculum's right, we just need to find a way to get the kids to do what we want them to do in the curriculum. And then Mathia is planned out throughout. So Mathia is where they kind of get the skills, right? They have a Mathia day, they're all on, and Tracy saw it one time, and she said to me, what were they doing in that class, right? It doesn't look normal, but it's a day of curriculum, but now kids are going at their own pace. So it's giving them the skills they need to back up what we're doing in class, but if a kid needs a little more time, the kid can take a little more time. If the kid wants to go ahead, they can go ahead if they want. But it's a planned day of instruction. We plan those days intentionally. There's a whole scope and sequence that goes with it that says, you should put a Mathia day in here. You should put a Mathia day in here. And we're learning as we go. Believe me, I made mistakes. We've made mistakes from the beginning. But I think about it all the time. And I say, I think we finally have something that will help us move kids to a higher level that we want to move them to. We just need to learn how to work with it and get that to happen in the classroom.
Any questions? Ms. Patterson?
So I agree with everything that Matt said. I think teachers have curriculum at their fingertips, right? During their PLC time, before they had to spend a lot of time looking at what materials they were going to actually use. Now they can spend time talking about content and how they're going to facilitate those lessons that are in there. They have slide decks, so teachers have the option now of using the textbook or using the slide deck and loading it up to Google Classroom, so students can work right in Google Classroom from there. They have ready-made assessments for teachers to use. They can modify them. They can use them for do nows. They can use them for exit tickets. I also think it allows time for students to be more independent learners. Over the past couple of years, we've done a great job with doing small group, a lot of collaboration, but we strayed away from students working independently. This allows them the time to do that. And I also think with data. So over the past couple of years, we really haven't had, I don't want to say time, but resources to look at consistent formative assessments. So now there's data every day. They can go in math, what they call live lab. So if your students are logged in doing Matthew, you can actually watch them and pull them over if they need support. Principals were trained how to analyze data, so now we can meet with the leads and talk to them about the data that's coming in to make sure that they are implementing it with fidelity and that all classrooms are doing it. At the end of term 2, we had to reassess as a school and say that we weren't up to the hours. They really want you, I think it's 5 hours in 4 weeks, to be spending that amount of time in every single classroom, every single student. So the math department and I had to meet and really just see how we were going to restructure how we were using time weekly in order for them to get that in, pull small group, and still stay with the curriculum and not fall behind. So I think it's been great so far. Not that we haven't made mistakes.
No, we made them too. I will say one thing about the teaching manuals though. So I'm trying to plan all this out myself too and get used to the curriculum, and I always refer to the manual over the online. It's so much easier. But the other point I was thinking of when you were saying that, if you go into Durfee right now, and you go into a regular ed classroom, you go into a special ed classroom, or you go into an L classroom or a language base, they're all doing Carnegie. Now, do they need to scaffold? Absolutely, but they are all, in every one of those classrooms, they are all starting on grade level content. But we have manuals for all those teachers also, right? That piece is important. So now they take and inside the manuals for Carnegie, I don't know about yours, for Carnegie, here's scaffolding techniques for L's, here's scaffolding techniques for special ed kids. So you can it has everything a person could possibly need inside that manual, inside the whole curriculum itself. But the manual, like people are looking at it, I could bring it into Jean's room, she's like, Matt, I go down the side, and I'm like, Jean, you put all these nice scaffolds in your slides, right? I go down the side of the book, and it has a lot of good ideas for me, and it's all built right in there.
For new teachers, they have guiding questions for them to use. It gives staff the opportunity to even create their own screencastify. So we have some teachers who put hints right in the slide decks. If you click on that, you can see a video that they've created. So it's just given them time to do the things that we've been asking them to do.
For the people who are using it, and there's different levels right now. Some people still I want to make my own slides. Like, why would you want to do that? But for the people who are using it for what the money has bought, That's exactly what's happening. There's more conversation about the content, which there needs to be right now, because sometimes we run across a question, we go, it was in geometry the other day, okay, well, what's the answer? And now it becomes a conversation, right? And there's more time for that, and that's where the time needs to be spent, not at building the lesson, but looking at a lesson and saying, how do I teach it? How do I bring it up? Or how do I bring it to a level that will bring everybody up? That's what we need the time for. I think having this Carnegie allows us the time for that, more so.
Mr. Aguirre?
How does it integrate with the ANET? In the high school, you're still using ANET as well?
We are.
And how does that integrate with?
We are. It's a little bit better this year. Last year, it was not aligned at all for high school. We had ANET tests that maybe there were 2 questions on the test that we had already done with the curriculum, and the rest wasn't. It wasn't aligned at all. I worked with Sarah for a while and Cheryl too, trying to get that more aligned. I don't see my own personal opinion, I don't see a great integration of the two of them. The test, the ANET test we give are more aligned now because ANET worked to help make that happen, so that now it aligns them more to Carnegie, the way the Carnegie curriculum is laid out. I don't see a great integration so far.
But is it on them?
I'm missing it.
It sounds like it's on them, not necessarily on the school. So it's on with the Carnegie and the ANET got to get on the same page.
They didn't have a Carnegie track. They had a couple of different tracks already created. Carnegie wasn't one of them. I think they knew that we were a good partner for them. Like we employed them. Carnegie is trying to become one of the main curriculums in this area of the country. So I think it really behooved them to make sure that they started to line up with Carnegie and what they were doing.
But I mean, just as a layman, if you look at everything should be aligned to the standards, the tests, everything. So if both of those are 2 different things, but they're both aligned to the standards, they shouldn't they just universally like get it at the same?
Well, we wanted them to flow the same, so the content was out of order, depending on
The scope
how
and
you
see
look
what
at it. The standards.
ANET will do is they will model their schedule of assessed standards after a particular curriculum. So they could follow, an Engage New York sequence, and they could kind of pull their questions together. We're going to assess these standards because they coincide with the scope and sequence for Engage. So that they do that. What will happen is they'll create it if there's enough of a need.
So we have it for IS.
So we have it for illustrative math because there are enough schools in Massachusetts who are using illustrative that it made sense for ANET to create an assessment because their customers were looking for it. And that's generally
So it's basically ANET catching up.
it's
to-
ANET catching up to the need.
They had to rework their
Yeah,
order.
and so it really just is, and they want to make sure that they have a wide enough network, because one of the things that they kind of sell on is you can compare yourself to other schools who are using the same curriculum all over the country, kind of thing. And then you have like this national pool. So they're looking to make sure that, they have enough customers that are looking for it.
But wouldn't it be maths? You got to learn this before you learn that to build off each other. Wouldn't there be sort of maybe a mid-year assessment that you should, for the first 6 months of an Algebra 1 class or a geometry class, shouldn't you be learning almost the same relative standards in those 6 months?
You do learn the same standards, but you can, this curriculum kind of puts statistics in the front, where the other curriculum would put statistics more at the end, so it throws everything off. And statistics is a piece where you can kind of play around about where you put that, even though it's a grade level. So they don't always line up the same way, but you're still getting the same standards.
Because we do pay for ANET for high school,
Yes,
right?
we
So we're paying for it. That's why I asked is how is it?
Yeah, as soon as we knew that it wasn't aligned, I had a conversation with them. They worked to align, and I think that it's, as he's saying, you have to have, they want to compare, they want to have a pool so that they can say, okay, you can compare your data to Springfield or whatever, and they didn't have enough of that, so they're going with the mass. But we said that in order for us to stay with them, they needed to align it. They were very clear on that, and we'll have,
And it has started off much better this year.
On the slide, it talks about small teams working to create scope and sequence. pacing guides and units of study.
Mm-hmm.
But you had mentioned that the curriculum actually, indicates those, or
Well,
recommends those, is that?
Well, it gives you, the book actually, the teacher manual actually is the layout of the year, and it gives you, inside the book, it'll say, this topic, it goes by module, then topic, then lesson. I still get used to that, module, topic, and lesson. And it will break the lesson down, it will tell you by days what you should be doing inside each one, and it'll tell you this one should be 2 days here, then you do a math a day, then you go on to the next lesson. This lesson might be a 2 to 3 day lesson. So it does have it has it paced out. We still need to look more in depth into the lessons to actually find out what we're going to do with them, but there's a pacing guide, I would say, that we try to follow. We still need to do some more work with to understand the overall module itself. I think it's work we still need to do. Like, you go in at the beginning, and right now we're kind of going through by lessons, but we need to work more on the overall picture of what the module is supposed to do. But as far as the pacing guide, it's there for you.
Yeah, that just, my last question is on the internal controls to be sure of the fidelity of use. Like, what is the system that we have for that?
At Durfee, you have me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to pat myself. I believe that this is a good curriculum, and I believe that the only way you can prove that it is, or not, and maybe it comes out not, is that this is what we do, right? And we give it a shot. So I can honestly tell you, you can go into any math course in Durfee, it is Carnegie. I'm not saying every teacher's going to say they like it if you ask them.
Yep. So we're taking that same question though, so like it's you, but what do you do as a system? So like that's you. You
Yep.
leave and go somewhere else and somebody else comes in. What system is in place so who are you reporting to relative to monthly, bi-weekly? How many people are actually doing this to your bosses and levels of leadership? Like what is the reporting structure for the internal control?
So, well, I will say that across the district, we have a couple of things. I mean, one is similar to what Stephanie mentioned in terms of, walks with leads and things like that. I mean, that is happening. That's happening at every school. It's happening with district personnel, on those teams. So we have a district goal set around the use of these high quality instructional materials. So that's what we are monitoring. So we can do it through observation going into schools. There's also Mathia, the use of that Mathia platform is something that is monitored kind of externally because we can see the usage at each school. Carnegie as a partner, I think, has been pretty phenomenal. So they're here monthly getting into schools, doing walks. So they partner with school-based teams. I've been on walks. We observe, we debrief. They're doing planning sessions with teachers and really taking, like, I was at one late last week, where sat down and took a look at one of those modules and getting into those individual lessons because there was a teacher at the school who was kind of struggling to make sense of it all and was kind of thinking like I could probably skip this. It's not that important. But we sat and we looked through, how the thinking is developed around the particular concept so that she could understand why we're not skipping this. We have to make this work. So I think that, school-based structures in within the district, and then that look from the external partner. Just met with principals, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, there's one-to-one coaching, like Tracy said, so they're in there walking with the department heads. And then I know that we're talking about it in our school where I'm looking at the data because we were all trained, so you can pull it up, we have access, working with the leads within the building, and then the data was brought to a principal's meeting where they showed the usage for every single school for workspaces, completion of the course, and we had discussions around that. So every principal has the capacity to go in and look at their data individually by school.
On a local level at the high school, aside from Matt, you guys have dean meetings and there's an AP in charge of curriculum and instruction, Shayna, that you meet with her regularly and you guys do
We
your
meet
work
with
with data.
Shayna every other week. We have department meetings, we talk about it. We report out sometimes about what we're doing in our PLCs, how we're planning for the curriculum that we have. from the outside. I've also invited Fernanda in. She's done a walk with me to check out the new curriculum with a focus on health, of course. But we went to a lot of different classrooms. So I think I think it's kind of like stretching out into different places, right? Where you got the teachers in the school, you have me, Shane is with me in the school, but then you also have outside people coming in and all looking at the same thing. We're saying, this is our curriculum. And now if Tracy came in and she went into a room, that's what she would expect to see. If Fernanda came in, she would expect to see Carnegie happening, no matter where we are.
Yeah, I just think if we could get something maybe on an explanation from you across the district of internal controls for fidelity of use, I think that would be important. We don't want to get to the point of 10 years from now or 6 years from now when this is over and we say, well, we didn't, do it. Some did it, some didn't. I get that you have varying levels, but from administration, if we say this is what we're going to do, here's the expectation, it makes your job a lot easier because there is no, well, I'm going to go try and go off on my own. And I'm not saying that's happening.
Yep.
But I think what's happened in the past was that happened. And nobody was really pushing it to say, no, this is what we're going to do. And this is why we're going to do it with some research. So I get all that. I'm just thinking 3-4 years down the road, we want to be saying we all implemented it, like you said, or across, you're only one middle school. What do all the middle schools do? You're looking at all. So fidelity would be.
And I think, we didn't touch upon that either. The beauty of it is that it is in all middle schools. So now, if you have fidelity there, now they all come to me, and they all come from the same curriculum, and the kids are all used to it. Like that, I can't wait to see 2 more years from now when we get the 6th grade who started, right now they come to 9th grade, but it doesn't matter what school they came from now, because they're all doing it.
Right. I get it. I yield. Thank you.
Anything? You good? Yep. Open Sci-Ed.
So, Open Sci-Ed is an open resource. I just want to start from that point. It's not a for-purchase curriculum. Anybody can go onto openscied.org and see any unit at any of the 3 middle school grade levels right now. They could see units for COVID, for elementary, middle, high, that are all freely open and available at no cost. The cost for Open Sci-Ed right now comes from us needing to, with what got approved in June of 2020, was what we needed to buy in terms of kits and durable materials to establish that we had the equipment to do this high-tech science, really. And that's the money that was allocated and the kits that were purchased 2 years ago. How we came about learning about Open Sci-Ed is that I would say at least 4, maybe 5 years back, in Massachusetts, there was recognition that the majority of what was being done in Massachusetts, in all districts, not just ours, was not working for kids. Scores were not where they wanted them to be on MCAS. And so DESE put a lot of time in looking over Mass Curate, looking at ed reports, looking at equip reports, and the majority of materials available were not meeting standards. That's just the landscape of science curriculum. DESE became part of 10 partnership states that worked with these developers at Open Sci-Ed. And Open Sci-Ed work goes back probably 40 years of research and built upon a next-gen storylines curriculum that's been around for several years to get the materials and the lessons that we're now using in our classrooms. When I came on board, I made sure that I communicated through the Joint Labor Management Committee, through building PLCs and CPTs, what information I was getting when I met with the science leads at DESE and science leads from other districts to have people start to consider this new approach that was coming. Open Sci-Ed is the framework that's being used as a model for the next generation innovative MCAS that's coming for grades 5 and 8. So we're aligned in Fall River in a very good position to be aligning our curriculum and our instruction in the way that Massachusetts is going to assess students. So that's like the grand view and the vision that DESE had is what I really tried to communicate to teachers, building leads, and everybody throughout the district, so that we were making sure we were making the right strides in the right areas. Open SciEd comes with a huge instructional shift. It comes with a huge design shift from our previous curriculum maps. And it's been aligned by DESE to the mass frameworks for the scope and sequence that makes sense for Massachusetts on how students are ultimately assessed on MCAS. It is based on state and national standards. It looks different than other science curriculums out there because it requires a storyline that incorporates different grade level standards. So a unit at 6th grade might be built around how a two-way mirror works for light and matter, like you see in the FBI rooms and stuff when they interrogate somebody at the police station. Students learn how that mirror works, and in doing so, they're learning about the design of the mirror, the engineering behind it, how the brain processes the image, all together in this big picture storyline to solve a problem. And the curriculum and the lessons, the unit, is based on what's called an anchoring question, and every lesson within it has its own question to be answered that. So what students are doing is learning how to develop and practice their inquiry skills and learn science like a scientist would, like a researcher would. So it's a very different approach than anything that we did in this district prior. And so with that, took a lot of, I think, consideration and buy-in. I started with actually virtual PLCs because we were in the middle of trying to learn about this and figure it out when COVID hit and we went remote. And teachers at the middle school and at Durfee spent a lot of time with me in weekly PLCs all the way through the summer trying to just figure out what this would mean for them and what it would look like in their classes. So I had that buy-in from the teacher level, and I had that buy-in from the building lead levels, because building leads like Matt were part of that early work. Matt was at CUS at the time. It provides hands-on, inquiry-based science where students learn to really develop their sense-making. They notice and wonder and ask a whole lot of questions right up front before they're given any kind of content. And then they work through by doing investigative tasks to develop their own meaning in that content and build their understandings. And so what it requires are these instructional shifts that teachers are now facilitating, and they're promoting inquiry, they're promoting depth of knowledge, they're promoting high skills proficiency, which all results in a lot deeper of learning. How we've kind of gone about this journey is that we're actually at the middle school in year 2 of our implementation, because we did begin this implementation in that first year of COVID, starting in the classroom and then remotely. We applied for a 3-year adoption program through DESE. It's funded by the 1-8 Foundation through the Mass STEM Hub. And we have all of our schools with middle school grades, except RPA right now, are part of that cohort 1. And so we have funding that came about after our initial district investment. We have funding through this 3-year grant program for every one of our schools that are heavily involved with it now, so that all teachers will get between 4 to 6 units of PD. There's 6 units per grade level, and at each grade level in the larger schools, there's a grade level champion. They'll be trained in all 6 of the units for that grade level, as are the building lead, so the science leads in the building, those admin that lead the science team, have that opportunity for that training, and then all grade level teachers will get at least 4 units of PD. And then they also supply the funding for us to buy the durable equipment. We had that nice beginning of our durable equipment through the school committee approval from a few years ago, but the increased adoption of new units is funded through those grants. Along with that, we have a mentor to our district who is a former Boston Public Schools teacher who's now working through Boston College. Boston College has a group that supports this implementation in the districts that are part of the cohort 1, and they work with me and the teachers directly to be able to come into the schools, do learning walks. They provide the PD. We're in the process of the first in-person PD cycle for teachers. Summer PD had been virtual, and all the teachers have been going through a 2-day in-person PD for the next unit they're going to teach. But they are readily available. I'm in contact with that group and that mentor almost daily, and they are also in contact with the buildings, with or without me, and just keep me informed. We've done walks with that mentor in all of our buildings that are part of cohort 1, and teachers have been able to get direct feedback from that mentor, ask questions about his experience in implementing these same lessons. And he's been part of our science lead meetings that I run monthly, and part of even individual school CPT and PLC meetings. So the level of support that we have through DESE and through Boston College for the middle school program is extremely high financially in terms of PD and materials, but also support and implementation so that our teachers have resources of people with experience in utilizing this whole new pedagogy and whole new approach to science teaching. The work that we've done at Durfee and now Stone is Durfee, as part of their turnaround in my first year in the district, they initially adopted Next Gen Storylines, which is the precursor to Open SciEd, and had restructured their curriculum approach based on the pedagogy that's part of Open SciEd. And so Durfee and Catherine Waldron, the high school teacher at Stone, are part of the field test of the Open SciEd units for high school. So that's happening now. And they, again, have structure and supports through DESE, through a team of districts where we have a champion from our district, the other participants have champions from theirs, and they support each other through this implementation. And they gain a lot of PD from this consortium of Open SciEd, DESE, and Dana Center experts to help with PD implementation and rollout. For elementary is the third in the Open SciEd plan, so they will be looking to field test Open SciEd in the coming fall, once those units begin to be developed. And this field testing involves getting student and teacher feedback. Once the units are field tested, they will update them based on needs that they identify before they're formally rolled out. So we're a partner in this work as one of 10 states and hundreds of thousands of kids and teachers that are implementing that. The evidence that we have for the impact of this work that we're doing is that within Open SciEd are daily formative and strategic summative assessments that all teachers are using, and they're available without teachers having to develop anything. They can access, as Matt said with the math, they can access the assessments digitally. So we're working to take those digital assessments, move them into Illuminate so that teachers will grade them and they can manage their data and use it as real-time formative to help them support their students and to make sure that instruction is aligned where students need it. We've also seen in the work that we've done through district-based built benchmarks that student-constructed responses are deeper and thorough in a way that wasn't there pre-Open SciEd and Next Gen Storylines. So we've seen some changes happening, and we saw some of that change even in some of the MCAS items from last year's results. And then we also have our teacher and student feedback that we've gotten, some solicited, some not. And one that I really think is worth sharing is that on a DESE meeting last week, one of the 8th grade teachers from CUS had shared with the other districts that it was really interesting to see that particular teacher has regular ed periods, they have a GATE group, and they have an L group that's mainstream and FELS. And that teacher shared that it was really cool to see students across those 3 different kinds of classrooms engage, model, and apply their thinking and the concepts that they were developing from the same exact lessons. So it's providing opportunities to kids in ways that some of the previous materials didn't, and that's part of why those materials don't pass on any of the ed report and equip and the Mass Curate ratings, because they just didn't meet needs. So we finally found something that is meeting those needs, which is really wonderful. Looking ahead, we will have this ongoing PD for the next 3 years for our leads and our teachers, and that's not just sending 1 or 2 teachers from a building, it's sending every teacher that's teaching with this open science so that they can learn the pedagogy and this whole new shift in how they instruct. It's very different, looks very different than before. I've applied for RPA to be part of cohort 2. So we're gonna go through that interview process with RPA, and hopefully next year we'll have them receiving the same kind of professional development and funding for their durable equipment as the rest of the district. We will ongoing have to, like any science program, replace some consumables over time, but for right now we have everything we need from the funding that we have. We are looking for full high school open science implementation in what is currently like our college preparatory courses. It wouldn't replace pre-AP or the AP program, that would still exist, but this would be another option for certain students to be able to choose which, depending on what their future goals are and their career paths might be, to choose which way to go, through the College Board way or the Open Science way. And we also will be doing a gradual adoption of the elementary OSE units. We do have, currently, Henry Lord and Sylvia have some 5th grade teachers that are using the Next Gen Storylines units to try to just pilot those in our classrooms to just start to make the shift. Our elementary teachers and our middle school teachers have been also engaged in innovative MCAS professional development through DESE and WPI to start making the instructional shifts that go with the pedagogy that are based on open science. So we will be working with our elementary teachers on the February 4th PD to take the mystery science modules that we're still investing in while open science is being developed, and help teachers to use the storylines that just rolled out for mystery science and start to get the routines in place so that students are doing the heavier lift and not the teachers, so that students are sense-making and making meaning about what they notice and wonder, and they'll learn how to actually practice science. So that's really where we are with open science. I don't know what questions you have for me.
Yeah, who's field testing first? We're field testing in 22, correct?
So we currently, so we're in at the middle school, grade 6 to 8.
Okay.
This is our 2nd year of using those lessons, those
Okay,
units.
okay.
At the high school level, for biology, chemistry, and physics, there's a group of teachers that are using open science materials right now for those 3 courses at Durfee, and the physics lessons are being used at Stone with their population there with a lot of interest and success. So that's happening right now at Durfee.
And the feedback is they're as excited as you are?
Yeah, honestly, it is. It's really, really neat to see and hear the students thinking and their questions, and just to see how they tie it all together. It's definitely different than it was, and it's establishing there's a lot of SEL in it. It's establishing this community where there's a high respect for other people's thoughts and ideas, and there's a lot of engineering and modeling that goes in it. It also is paralleling, as I said, the innovative MCAS development. So in a few years forward from now, students are going to experience MCAS in a whole different way. They're going to get like almost like a comic book storyline of information that has some data and graphs and things, but it looks cartoonish. They'll be given a problem to solve, and they'll have to use a computer simulation to set the parameters for an experiment, generate data, and then use the data they generate to answer a series of questions. So that means that Mrs. Ponce and I could be sitting side by side taking the same MCAS, working on the same part of it. She could choose one set of parameters, I might choose another. So we'd have different data that gets generated. And then we each use our own data to answer a series of questions. So it looks a lot different than even the updated MCAS that our kids are taking now. That whole design was kind of just founded upon Open SciEd. So like when DESE started rolling this out 4 or 5 years ago, and to get districts to understand what this phenomenon-based learning was and how we needed to get students to do all this sense making, they were very strategic in not just high quality curriculum, not just instructional pedagogy, but also in the way that our students are going to be assessed. So,
Any questions? Mr. Aguirre?
Just a question on you had mentioned at the beginning it's not similar, or it's not the same as the other curriculums, but then later on you said that there is materials that the teachers don't have to, they can utilize the materials of the program you're speaking of.
right, like the nice thing about it is there's a teacher guide, a teacher like a handbook for every unit. It's readily available right on the internet. Anybody could register and download it. Within there, it gives a lesson overview. Every lesson has an overarching question, and it tells the teacher right in like a 29-day sequence of what's going to happen every day. Some lessons are 1 day, some are up to 3, and they might be doing a traditional lab and making sense and meaning out of what they figure out. But they're following a story. Like the first one that I trained on when I learned about this through DESE was a middle school student who wasn't feeling well. She was always having an upset stomach. And so the students then start to follow through this journey of what could possibly be wrong with this student. And they look at doctor report data, they look at internal intestinal data, they look at just student report information, they do a whole bunch of analysis of actual tests like the doctor would run, and eventually they learn that this student has celiacs, but nobody tells them that. They figure it all out through this journey. And so every unit is a journey like that, and with that plan come all the daily assessments, they come all the formative assessments, like the midpoint and the end of the unit, so that all teachers would be using the same assessments and the same flow of things, whether they're at Morton or Costa or Henry Lord. Because we started this, like I really did start this kind of grassroots through PLCs in the pandemic, our teachers had formed networks within our district. So it's not uncommon that a teacher at Talbot might email somebody at Morton and say, I'm on this lesson, I'm doing this tomorrow, I noticed that you did it yesterday, I've got this question, is there something you can help me with? Our teachers at every Friday log in an Excel spreadsheet where they end for that week. And I set that up not really so that I could track it, but so that teachers could look and reach out to each other for supports, because we started this work, as I said, when a lot of teachers were teaching hybrid and remote. It was pre-cohort 1 with all this state support that we got involved in later. And our teachers collaboratively using the open sourceware had readied things so that if we were trying to teach virtually, they had access to what they needed. I was really worried about just everything that they were going to have to lift through COVID. So teachers have worked really hard on supporting each other, and now we have this added benefit of all these Boston College and DESE supports through the 3-year pilot that we're part of.
Yeah, I just was curious, English and math is always focused. You know, we focus our resources and everything, then science. It begs the question, do we have anything similar for social studies? Is there curriculums that need to be enhanced for the other subject matters, even the electives, as we go through the...
In the next cycle, we will be bringing forth, we did talk to Siobhan Ryan, who leads our social studies, and she said that we would have better information for the next meeting for us to go. That's what we're going to do. Look at all of our curriculum for all subjects so that we can make sure that the committee is well aware of what's happening in all schools.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want one teacher, you know, if I'm teaching a class and I have all the materials and all the resources, and then you're teaching a different class and you have nothing. That's not fair either, so
Yep.
trying to keep it equitable.
That's right.
But with that, I yield. Thank you all.
Can I just
Yes,
appoint
absolutely, Mrs. Collins.
Wonders? That was part of the appropriation that was tabled for us to, and referred back to the subcommittee, so it would have to be referred back to the full committee so that we can,
Have to
Make a motion to approve and forward it with a positive recommendation.
Second. Second, okay.
Mr. McGinn?
Yes.
Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Ms. Pereira?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, new
My only,
business?
oh, sorry,
so go
my
ahead,
only,
Ms.
the only
Barr.
thing I was gonna say, I reviewed this material and I took time to research, the different curriculum we're using, so I don't have any questions really in regards to the curriculum, but I do wanna sort of reiterate what, Mr. Aguirre said in terms of maybe the math curriculum not being used as aggressively by all teachers equally across the board. And I do understand how you are monitoring that or tracking that, but my question would be, when you discover that's happening, what are the strategies that are, you know, assisting or supporting that instructor? And are we looking into the reasons why? And I do agree with you. I think when this is happening, you know, now that this is happening in middle school, you will see possibly teachers more engaged in the curriculum because students are coming in already, you know, having a strong understanding of the curriculum. But what strategies are used right now when you see teachers maybe struggling with
So,
fully engaging?
so I can give you 3 different ones. And one's just starting, one's been happening, and one is going to start. So the use of the Carnegie coaching. So PD came with the package when we bought it. So I was lucky enough to get this woman. Her name is Carrie. We have a fantastic relationship. When she first started coming, we decided that we needed to have some model classrooms, right? Because people were not used to teaching this curriculum, teaching this way. So we chose a teacher who taught L's, mainly. And Carrie worked with her, and what she would do is, like, sometimes I was lucky enough to have her come to my school 2 days in a row. So they would sit down and they would plan a lesson together, right? Then the next day I would set it up so when Carrie came back, she'd watch that lesson, and then I would give them time to debrief at the end. So those 2 days together really works well. So she's done that with a couple of different people for me in the school. She worked the most with Jean, because I wanted Jean to be like the model classroom, but she's done that with some other teachers. She also sits in PLC. So I'm learning as I go also. Maybe 3 weeks ago, the last time she was in, we sat in an Algebra 2 PLC, because Algebra 2 was a team that needed a little bit of a push. And when she sat down with them and like said to them, you don't need to follow this to the exact T. If you want to change the do now because it makes more sense. If you want to take a piece of this lesson and make it your do now, so you're, for the sake of time, you're saving time. Because time seems to be the thing, right? So she's a good resource. I've gone in with a special ed teacher. We've gone to a special ed room and we modeled, her and I. She was the special ed teacher. I was the regular ed teacher. We modeled what Carnegie would look like. We were doing 2 things. We were trying to model the Carnegie, because to me, the regular ed teacher just wasn't getting it the way it should. And she was modeling like what we were co-teaching. How do we co-teach in Carnegie? So we've done that. We want to do more of that. We also hired a math interventionist coach at Durfee. This year we filled one of those positions. And him and I just sat down maybe 2 weeks ago and said, I think that job's been evolving as we go along, and we just gave it another evolution that he has 4 teams he's going to work with, and there'll be 3 things I want to come out of it. One is the implementation of Carnegie. I have a couple of teachers. I think 2 of them are new year teacher also, so they still need help understanding this flow of what it should look like, and the release of the kids. That's hard. And it's hard for a new teacher, right? Because I feel like all my strength is when I'm at the front. And I can control everything. When it's the complete opposite, right? But they don't understand it. So we've just set him up, actually starting this week, where he's going to work with these 4 groups of teachers. They're all they all are inclusion groups. So his goal, we set 3 goals for him. 1, the implementation of Carnegie and how that works with Fidelity with these 4 groups. 2, setting up what it looks like for special ed, right, and the regular ed teacher to work together in that environment. And 3, to make sure that the accommodations for those kids are also being met through them working together through Carnegie. So that was a big one for us, but the goal is at the end, we have more solid people with the fidelity of Carnegie, but also solid co-teaching at the same time. So I get those 3 things happening to try to, where I see a problem, we try to look at it, but we kind of approach them in different ways sometimes.
Thank you.
I can speak to elementary.
Yes.
So we have building-based academic leads in all of the elementary schools except for Stone. So in those buildings, you'll find those academic leads providing PD. You'll find them in classrooms constantly providing feedback. You'll find them in PLT. The PLTs are facilitated by that coach, so they can be very, or by that lead, it could be a department head, so they can be very targeted to what the needs are of that team. And in addition to that, they have embedded coaching cycles. So if there's a teacher that's really struggling, to Matt's point, that coach or department head will go in and model and potentially go further and have a full coaching cycle with that teacher. In addition, we go in, we give feedback to principals and academic leads so that they can, from there, share that feedback in the way that they feel is best.
So is it safe to say between the high school, middle school, elementary school, everybody's kind of doing the same thing in regards to supporting the teachers in regards to funds? Yeah, the structures.
Well, the structures are in place, right? It's that fidelity also from our part. So we just need to make sure that we monitor and support the structures.
And one thing that I would just mention, Matt was just talking about the support that we get from Carnegie and with those on-site visits. If there's one thing I think we'll end up coming back to the school committee for, it probably will be additional funding for those on-site visits. We did contract out quite a bit of money. I think the initial contract had about $300,000 in professional development. And I think that going into next year, we will probably require some additional funding so that we can maintain what we were able to do this year. That would be one of our asks for sure.
Can you just define for the edification of the public and the committee what a coaching cycle is?
So a coaching cycle is when when a teacher either elects to be coached or there's something happening in the classroom that requires coaching to happen, whether it be pedagogical or content knowledge. And then a coaching cycle can be anything from one day. There's a collaborative conversation that happens with the coachee, and they come up with a goal and some criteria for success that they've met that goal. So for example, if it's around a small group instruction, maybe the teacher's struggling with that particular thing, the coachee and the coach will have a conversation about what it would look like in the ideal situation, like what would small group look like. Examples based on student data. Example, all students are highly engaged in the content of that small group, the teacher is prepared, etc. And then coaching could be that a typical coaching cycle starts with modeling, where the coach will go in and model the strategy or model whatever it is that's being, whatever the goal is. And then from there, there's usually some collaboration where they're co-teaching in that particular situation. And then the coachee takes on more of the teacher role, and the coach is there to give feedback. So it can last anywhere from a day to 6 weeks and potentially beyond, depending on the needs of the coachee.
So our plan is that Dave will go in one day and he will take on the role of the regular ed teacher and work with the special ed teacher as his partner, and the regular ed teacher will just observe. And we're gonna have a log going. And then the next time he goes in to do a lesson, he will take on the role of the special ed teacher and work with the regular ed teacher up front as the special ed teacher observes to see. And then the third time, the two teachers in the room will do it as he watches them to see. But we've already talked about the fact that, sometimes we think like a one and done is good enough, right? And that's not always, most of the time, that's not the case. So we've already talked about the fact that you may need to go in and repeat that cycle again, right? Because some of these people are brand new teachers, right? And so a lot of this stuff is new to them, never mind this teaching this type of content, right? In the way that they like to talk about the release part. So that may need to happen a couple of times before we get what we want. But it'll be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. When I ask that, it's because, like I said before, we hire coaches, we hire interventionists, we hire department heads. Nobody in the community knows what they do. And I don't think we highlight that enough, that the quality of the instruction in the classroom is what's going to make a difference to our scores and stuff. So if we don't highlight these things, the school committees don't know this is why we're spending this money. So when somebody in the community says what do coaches do? They're a waste of money, or an interventionist. We have the evidence from conversations like this, so maybe those things need to be highlighted more, not even here, just across, like, what do we do to help people, new teachers?
Yeah. So
The
this
new
will
teacher,
be-
you want them to work for 3 months and get out of the field? No, you're gonna work your
Right.
butt off to try to get them
Yeah.
to coach them up, do what you gotta do, but people just don't see that piece of it, so.
But we made,
Thank you for the info.
this his goal. Like Dave and I sat down, we said, okay, we want to switch what's happening here. And we made this his goal for the second semester, to take these 4 groups and get them where we want them to be comfortable so they do come back.
Yeah.
Right? But also, it's also what's best for the kids.
All right,
So-
thank you, appreciate it. Motion to adjourn.
Any new business? Motion to adjourn by Mr. Aguirre.
Seconded.
Second, meeting adjourned.